Oh, he's not here tonight.
All right, it is Monday, July 17th at 7:30, and this is the City of Brainerd City Council. I call the meeting to order. Item 2 is roll call. Administrator Bergman, please call the roll.
Chesak.
Yes.
O'Day.
Yep.
Stunek.
Here.
Terry. Stingline.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Bevins.
Here.
And Bedeau.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4 is the approval of the agenda. We have one request from the Street and Engineering Department to add to Safety and Public Works. Item 8, the Lum Park Road. Anything else?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
The consent agenda
I'm
item.
going to add this to, okay, I was going to do that next.
Okay.
Okay, let's do the agenda next. Oh, well, we can, no, let's do it separate. Let's do them separately.
So move the agenda.
Thank you. Motion by Chesak to approve the amended agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Stengline. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next up is item 5, the consent calendar. All matters listed are considered routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the council votes on the motion to be adopted by roll call. We have one request to the consent calendar, and that's a move to approve the consent calendar with the, with the addition of Minnesota lawful gambling application resolution authorizing the Brainerd American Legion Post 255 to conduct off-site gambling on July 28th and 29th at the Mills parking lot on Front Street in Brainerd, Minnesota. So let's make a motion. Let's look for a motion to
Motion
add
to
that,
approve
just
consent
with the addition,
of
okay?
that.
All right. We have a motion by Chesak, second by Chief Stunek. Any discussion? Hearing none, Administrator Bergman, please call the roll.
Chesak.
Yes.
O'Day.
Yes.
Stunek.
Yes.
Terry. Stingline.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
And Bevins.
Yes. Next up, one of my absolute favorite things, and I'm sure it's all of yours, our audit presentation. Mary Reedy, thanks for joining us again. You have to state your name, and I don't know why we need your address, but it's part of the gig if you don't mind. And then,
Okay.
please, thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for having me. Mary Reedy, I'm actually 13208 Little Falls, Minnesota. So thank you for having me tonight. We do have the audit results a little bit later than usual, but it was issued actually earlier than last year, just couldn't make the June council meeting work. Everything wrapped up together, went smooth, everything went on time. You do have the big bound document that feel free to read at any time. The first part of that is your management discussion analysis really gives you a big picture of what happened throughout the year. So if you read nothing else, kind of take a peek at that. We will base ours on the PowerPoint presentation. So within there, some graphs, some charts, just kind of where you can see where the city's been and where you're at now. So we'll start with that. Feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions. Definitely can be interactive as well. So a few things that we'll go over is Brainerd Public Utilities, their audit results, the financial results, city's required communication that we do every year, the city's audit results, financial results, and then any other discussions, insights, or observations that came from the audit. So overall, the Brainerd Public Utilities had a clean opinion on the financial statements, no findings in internal control, and no issues with Minnesota legal compliance. So clean results there. Page 4 just shows you the overall results. So 2018 is on your far left, and then 2022 is on your far right here. You can see that operating revenues did go up. Expenses also increased, so expenses actually went higher than revenues. But if you look at overall, the two top lines, for the most part, revenues have been over the blue line, over expenditures. So when you look at that, you're doing fairly well there. You do have some local option sales tax coming in, the green line down there, and then your overall change in net position. So total unrestricted net position dropped a little bit, down from 10.9 to 10.4. But page 5 shows you then the assets, far left, you can see that, 2022 and then 2021 on your right. So cash did decrease. There were some bond proceeds issued in the prior year, which were spent this year. Revenues increased. They did have a sale of renewable energy there, so you'll see that come through. And then overall, it had a positive cash flow from operations, even though it was slightly lower than prior year, it still was positive. Page 6 then, this net position is at the top on the far left, and then down below that is the liabilities. Overall debt did decrease, overall just principal payments being made on those. Electric department had a net gain of about 1.4 million there. Water had a net loss of about 273,000. So brought down that net position from 11.8 last year to 11.5 this year. And then wastewater also had a net loss of about 267,000. So it went from 19.8 to 19.6 million there. But overall, when you look at the totals, we combine all 3 of those departments into one. Page 7, so we'll go through the required communications. So our primary responsibility as auditors for an opinion on the fairness of the financial statements presented tonight. We do review internal accounting controls. Of course, we want to make sure that there are some in place with the city and that they're working. Risk-based audit approach, no way to test every transaction, so we do some detail level testing and then some overall testing in comparison. Current year to budget, current year to prior year, if anything looks out of the ordinary, we do more testing there. Federal awards, you did expend over $750,000 of that, so you were required to have a single audit, so we do additional tests on those funds specifically. Significant accounting policies, of course, those are always going to be outlined in Note 1. Unusual transaction, so this year you'll see the city, we did record that payment of the lawsuit. It did have to go in there this year, but the funding will come in next year, just the way that we have to record it under accounting standards. New standard, Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement number 87 deals with leases. So that was the new software that the city implemented. The biggest change will be with your airport. You had a lot of lessor receivables booked and then a deferred revenue on there. Pretty significant there when you look. And then it changed the format for the city as well for the leasee side. So you had a lot of leases with like your vehicles and things like that. Those all now are just recategorized and relabeled. So when you look through the notes, you'll see that change from last year. So overall, within the bound document, of course, you're going to have some management judgments and accounting estimates. We go through those each year. We come in and we do the audit and we don't have any adjustments. So Connie has everything ready for us. When we come out here, everything's adjusted. So what that means is as you're getting financial information throughout the year, it's accurate. You can really rely on that to make informed decisions. Okay. No disagreements with management there. No difficulties in counter-performing the audit. The new GASB standard took a lot of work, but Connie was able to get through that and get us the stuff we needed, so we were able to release on time. So page 10, overall the city's audit report, so an unmodified or a clean opinion on the financial statements, so highest level of assurance that we can give. Compliance and internal controls, no findings there. We did audit the airport improvement program. There were no findings there, so everything was clean. I know Connie works hand in hand with them as well to make sure they follow all of their regulations. We also tested Minnesota LEO compliance, and we tested about 7 areas there and no findings. So overall, really clean audit report. I know Connie and her team put in a lot of work to get all of those issued with no findings. So I'll let Connie take it from here.
We're on slide 11. Expenditures exceeded revenues by $2,160,000. This, as Mary mentioned, this includes a settlement payout of $1.9 million, and we had to recognize it in 2022, even though we didn't make the payment until 2023. The settlement was reached, and therefore it had to be recognized in 2022. Fund balance is approximately $2 million 1,655,000, of which approximately 2,240,000 is unassigned and can be used for operations. The fund balance did take a hit with not all of the revenue of how we're going to pay for the lawsuit being recognized until 2023, but that did why it took a hit. If we look at our 22 operating expenditures, it was approximately 13,504,000. And so that gives us a 17% of our 2022 expenditures and unassigned fund balance. And so we do not meet our goal of being 35 to 50%. At the end of 2021, we were at 39%, and now we're at 17%. I tried to do a calculation if we would have recognized all the revenue in 2022, what that would have been, and we would have been at 28%. If we go to the next slide, this compares the pie charts compare the revenues to actual revenues to budgeted revenues. The actual numbers are close to what was budgeted. The biggest difference is the interest income. We budgeted for $40,000, and we actually had a negative $473,000. And that is per generally accepted accounting principles at the end of the year. The investments need to be adjusted to market value. This is a non-cash transaction, and we don't budget for it because the city intends to hold our investments to maturity and not to actually realize that loss. And of course, the market took a hit in December. The next slide is also compares the budgeted expenditures of the general fund to the expenditures, and the biggest difference is the recognizing of the lawsuit in the general government. For the 2022 audit, just as an example, or as a reminder, that the general fund includes the operations of public safety, parks, and streets. So this is the first year that we haven't had to combine those three funds. It was all reported under one in the audit, and that was based on council action in August of 2022. So this slide is basically the numbers behind the two previous graphs. We were budgeting a deficit of $15,000, and that's because 2022 was a non-election year. Or it was an election year, so we were using fund balance, excuse me. And then we had our actual, where our actual expenditures exceeded revenues by the $2,163,000. So we were a difference between our budget and actual of $2,148,000. So the next slide, I mean, that loss is significant when you look at the budget. And so I wanted to kind of show council what we were at. Can you, 2 more slides, Sean? Right there, thank you. We wanted to know what was our true results, because that's important as we go into the 2024 budget season too. So the first column basically shows how we get from page 32 of the audit to where we came to the actual slide. So there's 2 funds that we have to report for reporting purposes that we do not budget for. That's the city's economic initiative and the CAFE plan. So if we take that out, and then we report differently for like the airport contribution, leases and para, we just report those differently for budget versus under GAAP, and so we come to that, and that's how we get to the far right column of the adjusted actual. This is what our previous slide showed. So then if we could go down to the second row, and we take out the lawsuit adjustment, so we take out the expense, and we also reduce the revenues that we did recognize in 2022, and we take out that fair market value adjustment, we get to our actual compared to our budget of $22,173, where our revenues actually exceeded our expenditures. Then if we look at our budget, which this budget is a little bit different than what was in your packet, the numbers are the same, but they're just kind of in different orders due to the adjustments that were placed. We missed the budget by $37,173.
You missed the balance budget?
No, the budget that was in the packet, Jeff, and the information that you got was the budget that wasn't adjusted for some of those accounting factors.
Okay.
It was the one that was in the audit, not the one that we want, not the one you have seen all year long in the financial reports.
Okay.
So I think that's really important to know as we go into the 2024 budget process. The next slide is, at the end of the year, a city should have enough unassigned fund balance to operate until June, when the first half property taxes are received. This is why we have the fund balance between 35 and 50%. That's also the state auditor's recommendation. And again, we only had 72 days available versus last year when we had 162, timing of the lawsuit recognition. If we go on to the next slide, we have the, let's see here. This is a bar graph for all of the city's fund, funds, excluding the airport, the library, and the enterprise funds, BPU, and sanitary and storm sewer. This shows for the last 5 years, from 2018 to 2022. The biggest differences is the intergovernmental revenue between 21 and 22, and this is a timing of when the revenue was received for road projects. And then you can also see the investment income is the fair market of value adjustment being negative for the last 2 years. The next slide is a bar graph for all the expenditures for all the governmental funds. Again, we see the general increase in general government due to the lawsuit. Capital outlay, we did delay construction projects in 2022. And then just a reminder, in '21, we started reporting BPU's debt as well on the cities. We did a prior period adjustment. The next slide shows that we need to have enough cash at 12/31/2022 in our debt service funds to pay the February 1st debt payments. We had enough cash plus some. If you recall last year, we would like our graph to look more like how it did in 2019. This was because of how we were budgeting for prepaid assessments that we received, and we're making that adjustment slowly up as we talked about during budget process. The last slide, I do believe, this is the total city's debt. This is the bar graph that shows the city's outstanding debt by type, and this includes BPU, and most of our debt is GO revenue bonds for the city. Slide 21 shows the sanitary and storm sewer funds. These operate like BPU, they're enterprise funds. The 2022 numbers were very similar to 2021. In fact, our charges for services were down about $4,000, and our operating expenses had increased $11,600 compared to 2021. We had a positive net position increase of $426,330, where revenues exceeded expenditures. And that's it.
So just a few follow-up insights and observations over there. So overall, audit results are positive, right? No findings on the single audit. You're doing what the federal government is requiring. You have great staff working here. Very much want to get it right the first time. They do contact us to ensure that, and makes the audit go very well as well. State reporting form and the GFOA certificate was submitted timely. That is submitted by your staff, not us. So staff do take care of that to get the award. Fund balance reserves, general fund, kind of hit on this already, 17%. Expect that to grow next year then with the revenue coming in. The policy there, like Connie said, and then paid for the settlements and revenues to be collected next year. Page 23, just hit on some other those small funds that you have included in the audit. And Connie did point out, so when you go to read the audit, you'll only see general fund, and then you'll actually go right to the revolving loan. Whereas last year, we kind of had all 4 of those back to back, so you could combine them all. So a little bit of change there. Revolving loan fund had a positive change in fund balance, so we received about $31,000 in loan repayments there. Debt service fund, restricted fund balance about $31 million, expenditures of about $5.5 million. Now, a lot of that is too from the component unit, as Connie said, BPU there. Fund balance did decrease, spend down of bond proceeds. Miscellaneous revenues, when you look at that, is the interest coming from BPU for the bond payments. It is just going right back out. Capital projects fund had an assigned fund balance of about $1.2 million, with expenditures about $6.8 there. Did transfers in taxes, intergovernmental, about $5.5 million to pay for those projects. And when you look at that fund, you actually did spend it down a little bit, so it came in at a loss of about 1.1 there, but still with a 1.3 million fund balance at the end. So that was a brief overview. I didn't know if there were any follow-up questions.
Any questions of our auditor or our finance director?
President Bevins?
Yes, Mr. Chesak.
Quick, I think. There's an item in there called customer deposits. What is that? I don't remember the dollar amount.
Is it going to be BPU or is that going to be the city?
I'd have to go back. it must be BPU. I
That's
can't
what I
remember.
was thinking. It's because it would be the prepayments from the customers
Okay.
that you
That makes
collect.
sense.
The only deposits that the city have are, like if we hold an escrow for a big building project until the grass grows or something like that, but those are called deposits payable, so I do believe it was probably BP.
It was on BPU.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Chesak? Or anybody else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you to Mary Reedy, our auditor, to Connie Hillman, our finance director, and Gabe Johnson, our finance chairman, and everybody else on the staff who worked on that audit. Next up is item 6B, our Parks Capital Asset Presentation Discussion. Jesse, I'm just going to turn it over to you to introduce this, because you know who's here and who's not, and what they're going to do.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Park Board Chair Andrew Scheib and Board Member Kevin Yeager are here to present the work that the Park Board has completed the last several months with collecting a list of capital assets in the parks. At this time, they're looking for discussion and input from the council on next steps, so I'll turn it over to Chair Scheib and Parks Assets.
Thank you, Jesse.
Perfect. Don't forget, you guys, if you would, list your name and
yes.
home address.
Andrew Scheib, 711 North 8th Street, Brainerd.
Kevin Yeager, 325 Bluff, Brainerd.
You.
Oh, sure, you put me to work.
All right. Thank you very much for having us out. We are reaching, I'll say, the final phase of a project that's probably started 18 months ago to develop a master plan for every park in Brainerd, and then to identify the capital items in those parks and find a way to maintain and improve what we have. So what I've handed out is a breakdown of the assets in the park. In your packet this week, you had a detailed list of every item. This breaks it out by park and by kind of activity, right? Sports, general park equipment, playground equipment, things like that. So the park board put in a tremendous amount of work, and I'm really proud of everyone on the board. We went to every single park in the city and walked through and picked out, right? There's 12 picnic benches here. There's, 18 streetlights, anything you can imagine, every component of a tennis court, a basketball court. And that's how we got to these numbers. So we're really excited to start working with you to develop a plan going forward. We have a lot of wonderful parks, and we want to maintain them. So we'll turn it over to Kevin, who's got kind of some ideas and how we want to gather your input on that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Scheib. Okay, guys, well, if you'll remember, not all of you were present, but about 2 years ago, I promised you that we would get a budget that actually made sense and was more forward-thinking than one we have been operating on for quite some time. So it's taken a while, but we've finally gotten there. And basically, to summarize Andrew's point, we've now basically have a list of every single thing that we own on a capital side within our parks. We have also not only created that list, but we've also projected the dates of when those items we think need to be replaced. So as we have that information, we can then create a chart that basically says what we think we need for capital operating to maintain these items to just a basic level of 50-year replacement. You'll see that this is broken down in both 30-year and 50-year, but generally speaking, an industry standard is 50-year on most capital items that need replaced. Some of them we know are shorter. For instance, like a splash pad, we know does not last 50 years, it lasts a shorter duration. We go by the manufacturer's recommendations of like 30 years, something like that. So if you take all that math and you work it backwards, you're going to see this chart that we've created here, which is a 30-year capital year-to-year budget chart on the right-hand side. And you will notice that there is a dramatically high starting point, and then as it reaches a maturity date of around 2034, it begins to kind of level off. And these numbers are not intended to scare anyone or say that we've done a bad job or that we're in trouble or anything like that. What it is intended to do is to illustrate that we feel that there is a gap in maintenance that has occurred over the past 25, 30 years that is now beginning to expose itself. We have a perfect manifestation of exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, last year with our softball lights, seemingly a problem that comes out of nowhere that no one knew was coming, or if we did, we didn't plan for it accordingly. So I would think of the chart that you see there as more of a representation of what we believe the blight is, or what we believe we're behind. If we were perfectly up to date, we would be able to kind of just cruise along at this 600 roughly grand per year and maintain everything we have, and we would have money set aside to replace our splash pad and to replace Lyman P. White when it reaches its age and so forth. And you would have that kind of steady cost per year to maintain your capital. We don't have that, obviously, because, again, we believe that we're blighted in some areas pretty severely. So that's why you see it very front-end loaded here, money-wise. Also, keep in mind that these charts do not anticipate or project any monetary value for inflation. We believe that inflation happens in parks or in capital at a higher rate than standard national inflation, and this is because typically, construction inflation increases faster than national inflation. So that's not taking any of that into account, okay? So this is a broad stroke tool. This is not a surgical instrument that's in front of you here. It's just intended to kind of show you guys what we think we've discovered. And then what we're really asking for is for you guys to spend some time, just look at this and give us some ideas on how we think we might attack this over the next 30 years. And we've kind of put together what we think are some very broad stroke strategies, and that's what you see in your packet tonight. And I'm just going to hit those really quickly, just so we can talk about what might be potential strategies and how you do this. The first ones are fundraising strategies. Obviously, you close a gap, a money gap, by creating money. That's one strategy. One is fundraising, charging for events, raising fees, activities, programs, reservations, those types of things. There's also a factor that could be considered where you use the assets in your park to create funds or revenue in branding. For instance, you take a park and you sell the branding as this park is such and such of an entity at such and such park, and you sell branding on yours. Those are all examples of how you might raise money to help cover this gap. Second is you request your community partners and clubs to take over a greater share of ownership. This would be Kiwanis, Rotary, those types of things. And we would really reach out and really lean on them to not just help when items get built, but really help to maintain them in perpetuity. Third one, not crazy about it. Maybe some people are, some people aren't, but a referendum. You go back to the taxpayers and say, we have a gap to maintain our parks. We believe that we could maintain our parks at a much higher level. If we had more money, would you help? That's certainly one strategy. Then you have the non-fundraising strategies. One of those, obviously, is you do nothing. You absolutely just maintain what you have and you fix only what's broken. And it's a much more reactive strategy, but it's a much less expensive strategy for sure in the short run. It's my belief that we've been using that basic strategy for about 30 years. And it is now really beginning to show that with the condition of some of our parks and our park spaces. Another one is to avoid what we call the grant trap, which is we are constantly being bombarded with a grant that allows us to build that or to build this or to build this, which is really exciting and fascinating and great for instant improvement, but it actually creates a greater long-term burden. So one of the things we feel pretty strongly about is to really try to avoid those grant traps. Another potential mindset would be to think about our parks more as green spaces and not so much buildings and structures. And when capital maintenance items comes up, maybe at that time you have the conversation of should we just demolish this and reduce our greater burden going forward. That doesn't mean you tear down an entire park, but what it does mean, I'm just going to use an example, is you take, for instance, Mills Field that has a really high amount of decking that's around one side that needs a lot of work at this point, and you say, instead of decking, we're going to put in concrete or we're going to remove those patios just to remove the burden. So that's just one example of how you can reduce your burden by removing capital or just having a different mindset. And then the last one is just life cycle planning and replacement. And that's really what we're pitching to you guys here this evening is you think of the long-term game. You think about setting aside money today because you know you're going to have to replace something 10 or 20 years from now. It's a much more long-term visionary approach to managing your money and your capital items. And that, I know you guys have a long meeting here already, but and that in kind of a nutshell is kind of where we're at. So we'd encourage you to reach out to the liaison, Park Board liaison, which is Dave, or even come to our next meeting. We meet basically once every Tuesday, not quite, but pretty close. We meet every other Tuesday generally, and our next meeting is coming up Tuesday. So we really would love feedback from you guys on what to do or how we may attack this as a team between Park Board and City Council, working together with a mindset that is less reactive, less myopic, and a more long-term vision on how to do this. Because we haven't even started our 2024 budget yet. We have one set aside, but we've really just now got these numbers. And we'd really like your feedback before we put a 2024 in front of you that has some version of a vision attached to it. So with that, if you have any questions?
Any
Yes.
questions?
President Bevins?
Yes, Mr. Chesak?
I read the item that was in our packet, and I apologize if it's there and I can't remember, but does it include parking lots and trails?
It depends. Generally speaking, if the parking lot is right in the middle of our park, for instance, an example of this would be Lum, then we did put a value in there for the replacement of that parking lot. Sidewalks that are inside our parks are, but it does not have items like grass or trees or necessarily those types of things. Think of this as more of hard structure, buildings, light fixtures, water fountains, playground equipment, flagpoles, stadiums, that kind of stuff, fencing, more of that type of thing. And that's why you see, for instance, the gap in the cost of Lyman P. White was much more than what we're showing here as the capital value. And that's because we didn't put a value to the grass and trees and plantings and those kind of things, but more just the pure cap. So this is just the capital side. So I don't know if that's even worse news or not, but that is just the capital side.
Mr. Chesak?
Yes, thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions? Any other, yep, Mr. O'Day?
Just the capital side, so just a rough estimate between this ask of 1.5 million, that doesn't include parks maintenance.
Correct. This is just the capital side.
And what were we at last year for parks maintenance?
Don't know.
Okay,
Don't know.
okay, just curious.
Any other questions? Kara Terry?
I don't have a question, but I just appreciate all of this work. This was a lot for you guys to take on. Holy moly. So thank you for doing that, and I would appreciate a joint workshop as well. I think that would be really good.
Yeah, that's great. I think I failed to mention that would be a possibility too. I think I mentioned working through Dave or coming to a park board meeting, but a joint workshop, we would love that also. We had one that kind of kicked off all of this work, if you guys remember. So it might be great to just get back one more time and just talk about it and see if we can come up with a strategy. Strategy is probably a combination of several or even all of these things. Don't know, but we really would love your. We would really like to be working on this as a team. When we present a budget, we want it to land upon you guys as though you are contributors in the conversation and have a voice in directing us as an entire entity in the right way to go. So,
Okay, we'll look at that in just a moment. Any other questions? Any other questions?
thank you.
Thank you, guys. Anybody want to pull up the global calendar, Administrator Bergman, and see if there's something we want to look at? Andrew, are your meetings during the day or in the evening?
4 o'clock on Tuesdays.
Open July
We're
31st.
certainly flexible. We can do later in the evening.
We have a BPU meeting at 6.
I'm gonna pay study at 7, park board at 8. Bring a case of beer.
Well, I mean, there is something to that.
It's a capital
Or you could
cost.
go ahead at 4 o'clock, ahead of everything. Anybody have a suggestion on the 31st at 4 or 8?
Not the 31st, that's our council meeting. Oh, no, that's BPU, okay.
Right, that's a
My bad.
BPU workshop at 6 o'clock.
Okay, my brain starts to shut down too late at night, so I'm gonna suggest the 4 o'clock.
Okay,
I'll go with that.
That's coming up
okay.
here.
I know.
Anybody object to that? Okay. Alderwoman Stengline, can you make that as a motion?
I move that we have a joint workshop with the park board at 4 o'clock on Monday, the 31st of July,
Second.
2023.
Second by Chesak. Any discussion? Andrew, how does that sound? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That's what we're gonna shoot for. The 31st at 4 here in council chambers. Okay. Thank you, Park
To lunch.
guys. Item 7 is council committee report. 7A is Safety and Public Works Committee Chairman Mike O'Day.
Thank you, Mr. President. We did have originally 7 items in SPW tonight. We had an additional total of 8. First item was a discussion on the assessment reductions due to the detours on Norwood Street, 14th and 17th. We had some individuals in here speaking last week. This was just a discussion item tonight. Staff's recommendation was not to make any motions or move forward on any reductions to these assessments. This streets project might happen 5, 6, 7 years from now, and by what we've seen in this memo, it would be a reduction in their assessment of maybe $30 or $40 or $50 6 years from now. What we did direct staff to do was pay some extra attention to that road as soon as we end the detour and do whatever repairs we need to do necessary to clean it up from whatever recent damages might have occurred or added to what was already there. And the staff was receptive to say that we can go ahead and make sure we clean it up as best as we can. But that was just a discussion item, so no motion there.
Hold on. There was something, though, we had directed staff on the signs. I know the answer to this, but for the public record, what happened there? With trying to detour trucks further south?
Right.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So we did have a vendor to deliver one sign and ended up just west of the intersection of highways 18 and 25. That sign did include messaging that said Oak Street was closed and that trucks were to use an alternative route. We had a second sign that we were waiting for from that vendor. However, it was broken, waiting for repairs, and we have not seen that one. That one was intended to go just east of 13th Street. At this point, we're expecting the road to be reopened on Thursday, so I did inform the vendor that we're probably not going to need that sign at this point. So we were hoping for a second sign, but we just weren't able to acquire it.
Thank you. Anything else on the detour, Chairman Johnson?
Yeah, I do think we should do something about the assessments, but I think it should be done by the council in 2026 when they're setting the assessments for the project. But I know the MnDOT policy that was included in the agenda or calculation included how MnDOT does theirs, but MnDOT directs truck traffic onto truck traffic type roads. Norwood Street is a 4-ton maximum road. So the amount of truck traffic and fifth wheelers and everything that's been on there has done a lot of damage. And I think that few block stretch of road, we should make note that when the assessments are being set in a few years, that the city detoured trucks that are too big to even fit on that road to use it. That wasn't what that neighborhood did. It was what the city did. And I think we should take responsibility for our actions.
Thank you. Any other comments on the Norwood Oak Street detour? Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next item was the approval of the Brainerd Transit fare increase. As most of you remember, we had this on our agenda 2 weeks ago. And we started a discussion in committee, but the motion came to move this discussion to full council. And so move.
Second. Well, we can't really, that's not really a motion or a second.
I was going to ask if you wanted a motion or if you also wanted to have
We
a
don't need
discussion.
it. We're going to detail it right now. Why don't you can you lay out the issue for everybody who maybe hasn't heard it over on PNF?
I would pass it to Mr. Dean.
Mr. Dean, can you lay out the issue? And
Thank you,
what the
Mr.
recommendation out of the Transit Committee was?
Thank you, Mr. President. So staff provided the financial analysis that was done last spring, and that was presented to the TAC committee in April. Through that TAC committee, they did vote to move the recommendations. They did not formally recommend the fare increases. They wanted to let the councils and boards elect them themselves without that recommendation, but they did move forward with the other recommendations. We did summarize in the agenda the actions taken by our 3 cooperative partners to date. So Baxter, Crow Wing County, and Pine River have all taken actions, generally going with the staff recommendations, with the exception of one slight change by the Baxter City Council that did increase their fares beyond what we recommended. So at this time, with the analysis, we are recommending that Brainerd increase their fares to $4 for a Brainerd originating trip with a same-day service of $8. I did want to note that With the changes to the service and the removal of Pine River, we did have to come up with a way to project what the expenses and the share of the expenses were. So part of the methodology that we used when preparing this spreadsheet was generally a fuel cost analysis. So based on the ridership, rough cost of fuel per rider, and developing that, we used that percentage of how much fuel was going into each of the three remaining cooperative partners to kind of establish or put a draft percentage of the expenses moving forward. And that's how we divided out what the recommended options expenses would be split moving forward. So that's how we kind of came up with the recommendation as we have it there. And with those fares, that's kind of where we came to with a recommendation on that. But with that, would be willing to answer any other questions on
Any
this.
questions of staff as to the issue? Okay, so this was on SP&W last 2 weeks ago. It ended up being a tie vote, so the mayor was absent, so we pushed it on to tonight. The recommendation on the Transportation Advisory Committee is to move it to $4, correct, Mr. Dean?
They did not formally make a recommendation on the
So
fare
there is-
increases.
There's no recommendation from the Transportation Advisory Committee. So why is this here?
So this
You
was
did it.
this was a staff recommendation
Staff
that was
recommendation.
presented
Has
to TAC.
Has the TAC discussed it but chose not to make a recommendation?
They did not want to formally recommend any of the fare
Okay.
increases. They felt that they wanted to leave that up to the boards and councils to make their own
Okay.
decisions on the matter.
You got an open floor. Anybody want to tear? If we don't have a motion, there's not a lot to discuss. We can do that out on the sidewalk. So we're looking for a motion.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Chesak.
I'll make a motion that we increase the fares to a advance notice in the city limits of Brainerd to $3 a ride and a same-day call for $6 a ride.
Okay? So that's $1 less than staff recommendation.
Yes, well, and 2 on the
Yeah,
same day.
2 on same day. Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion to increase the fare. Is this a same effective date of August 21st, Mr. Chesak? Yes, sir. To $3 per ride and $6 on same day. We have a second by Chief Stunek. Any discussion? Mr. O'Day?
Obviously, this would expand a shortfall. Where would that get filled in? Where would the money come from?
Potentially. Right now, we have a small fund balance. If that would be expended, it would have to come out of the city's general fund if that was the city that had a shortfall.
Okay. So this still leaves us with a shortfall. Any further discussion?
And Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chesak?
This service costs money, we all know that. And at this time, I feel the $4 and $8 fares are just going to affect people too much that don't have any other options. And I know we have to cover our costs to some degree, and I feel this is more of a compromise fare increase. If the projections are correct, it will be short, but I'll just call this a compromise increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Chairman Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I was ready to vote no on a increase to 4 and 8. We already increased it from 125 to, what's it at, 225 now or something this year. And it's public transportation, so I don't want to squeeze people, try to turn this into a profitable venture, but I also don't want to use any levy dollars. It should be able to fund itself. It just seems that the transit department is just spending entirely too much money. Personnel costs of $120,000, don't we only have one employee there now instead of 2? So I don't think that $120,000 number is right. The big thing is this, the 3PC contract of over $1 million. I don't get how the Transportation Advisory Committee can so confidently demand that the city council go with the high bidder for busing services. But then when it comes time to pay for that high bidder, they can't make a decision, and they're gonna put it off on the city council. Very disappointed in that committee. Not quite sure what purpose they serve at this point if they can't make a recommendation. But finally, this financial projection, and I know it was back in April and things changed and Pine River left, and, well, Pine River has decided they want to leave, but they are under contract, and until they notify us in writing, they're still under contract with us. But this financial analysis said same day $3, or no, regular $3, same day $5, and the Brainerd routes would cash flow. So I think going $3 and $6, if we were to trust this analysis, should cash flow the Brainerd side of the operation. So I think I'll support this motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Since we had a tie vote last time, I'll ask Administrator Bergman to call the roll, and if you vote yes, you are supporting the $3 and $6.
Chesak.
Yes.
O'Day.
Yes.
Stunek.
Yes.
Terry.
Yes.
Stengline.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
And Bevins.
Yes, that motion passes. Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our next item, number 3, was a request authorization to solicit engineering services for Southwest 4th Street outfall repair. Motion coming out of committee was to authorize staff to solicit a survey design proposal from a consulting engineering firm for the repairs, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by O'Day, a second by Chesak. Any discussion? Any discussion? Chairman O'Day.
I'll just mention this is right off Southwest 4th. You can almost see it from the street, but you can't really because it's such a steep hill. But if you walk down here and look at it, these pictures don't do much justice. But this just came to our attention about a week ago. And staff would like to move forward with this as quickly as possible so we can take advantage of the low water levels. That's all washout and a brand new beach for the individual that owns this chunk of property. So obviously we got to clean that up, fix the pipe that, I don't know if it rusted out or just fell off, but it turned into a new gully for us and we don't need any more of those right now.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Number 4 was a discussion on the street scanning software and proposal. Motion coming out of committee was to recommend including the street scanning and asset management software services in the 10-year capital plan, beginning with the initial scanning in 2024, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by O'Day, a second by Stengline. Chairman O'Day.
We had a discussion about this last year, and then we're having it brought back again after having kind of shopped around. We actually had 2 proposals on the agenda and in the memo, and now we have a third one that we were brought just tonight. We didn't move forward with any of those proposals necessarily, so we felt comfortable moving forward just budgeting this, and then as those proposals come forward with more detail, we'll be able to pick and choose what we want from a street scan. Whether that be just the street scan, what was the other 2 parts? The sidewalk scans and the citizen engagement, I believe.
Ramp collection, correct. Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Any further discussion? Chairman Johnson.
Is this coming out of the construction fund?
That's what we proposed in the memo, but we would be open to anything that the council wishes.
Okay, 'cause, yeah, the memo says construction fund, but then it says put it on the capital plan too. Oh, so you're talking about the street capital plan, the 10-year? Okay, I understand.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
thank you, Mr. President. Number 5 was discussion on micro mobility regulations. Motion coming out of committee was to direct staff to prepare and propose an ordinance regulating micro mobility, and I so move.
Second.
Motion by O'Day, second by Chesak. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Number 6 was consider directing staff to amend section 320 of the city code pertaining to contesting citations. Motion coming out of committee was to direct staff to amend those citations, or those sections of the city code pertaining to contesting citations, and designate city council as the authority to hear and review appeals, and I so move.
Motion by O'Day, second by Chesak. Any discussion? Chairman O'Day?
If you have any more questions, I can kind of brush on this a little bit, but there was a pretty lengthy process before it is right now currently for anybody that wants to contest their citations. We don't have that happen very often, but just seeing how expensive it can be in the way that we do it right now, moving it to this more streamlined design would actually help a lot in the long run.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you. Number 7 was just direction on active code enforcement cases. We had 2 cases on here, 1306 Oak Street. This is an abatement of offense. This is another repeat offender. It's a fence. I don't know if we have a picture on here or not, but there's a fence that's falling over. We haven't heard anything back from them. They've received their 3 citations, and we can't get a hold of them. So we need to abate the fence. Next one was 412 J Street Northeast. Same type of deal, but with just junk and debris that needs to be abated. And motion coming out of committee was to go with staff's recommendations on both properties, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by O'Day, a second by Stengline. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Number 8 was our additional item tonight. This is just approval of plans and specs and authorized bidding for Lum Park Road SPRA project. Motion coming out of committee was to approve the plans and specifications as presented and authorize bidding of the improvement 2117 SAP 018-600-034 with an anticipated bid opening of Thursday, August 10th, 2023, and I so move.
Second dash.
A motion by O'Day, a second by Chesak. Any discussion? Do we have an engineer's estimate on this?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. It's included in the agenda item, but the total cost of the project is about just over $260,000, with about not quite half of it funded by the State Park Road account project through the DNR.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
And a report.
Item 7B, thank you very much, is Personal and Finance Committee Chairman Gabe Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have an item, and the motion is to accept the resignation of paid on-call firefighter Matthew Ingeman, effective Friday, July 28th, 2023, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, a second by Stunek. Any discussion? You got a half hour.
No.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 8 is unfinished business, calling for applicants. The mayor has a charter commission with 2 terms expiring in 2026 and 2 terms expiring in 2025. Library board, 1 term is open and expiring in 2025. Rental Dwelling License Board of Appeals has 5 terms to expire in 2024, and that aforementioned Transportation Advisory Committee has 1 term to expire in 2023, as well as 1 term on the Economic Development Authority to expire in September of '07. As council president, I have 1 open committee of Parking Commission, 1 term to expire in 2026. The website is www.ci.brainerd.mn.us, and it's /boards. Next up is a public hearing and adoption of a resolution considering allowing the HRA to establish redevelopment project area, TIF district, and approving a TIF financing plan. This is Eric Charpentier. Come on up, Eric. Tell us what we need to know.
Thank you, Mr. President and City Council. This is a continuation really from our joint meeting that we held on May 30th. with the HRA board and the city council, where at that meeting we had an overview of the tax increment financing kind of in general, and then we had some discussion on the potential redevelopment TIF district at the former Thrifty White Building by D.W. Jones, who's the developer, or proposed developer. The TIF district would be a Brainerd HRA TIF district, and the HRA would be responsible for the development agreement with the developer and required reporting of the TIF district. However, the reason that we are in front of council is the city is responsible for calling and holding that public hearing for public input and then adopting a resolution for the creation of that TIF district. I do have a representative, financial advisor from Baker Tilly. Michaela is with us. She was at our May 30th joint workshop as well. She'd like to give a little bit of a brief update on where we're at as far as the development TIF agreement or the TIF and development plans. And we do have the developers here as well, if you would like to, after the public hearing, ask any questions of the developers. And really, I will then hand it off to Michaela. We do have a couple items that we do want from council tonight as far as recommended actions. Number one, obviously, listen to the short presentation from Baker Tilly, hold that public hearing to get public input, and then if the council so chooses, adopt the resolution establishing redevelopment project number 2 and approving a redevelopment plan, therefore establishing that TIF redevelopment district 2-1 and approving tax increment plan there too. So I will hand that off to Michaela if you so choose.
Please.
All right, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening, President, members of the council. I am here to give an overview or follow up from the workshop on tax increment, specifically to provide a brief overview of the redevelopment plan and the tax increment plan that's before you this evening. The consideration for City Council is the, after public hearing, consideration of the adoption of the tax increment financing plan for redevelopment tax increment financing district number 2-1, as well as the redevelopment plan for the redevelopment project area number 2. As a background, the city and the HRA have been working with the developer for a couple of years on the redevelopment of the properties to be included within the redevelopment district. There was a blight assessment done on the property in January of 2022 that did determine that the project area and the tax increment, the properties within the TIF district and project area do meet the requirements for inclusion within a redevelopment district, meaning that at least 50% of the buildings are considered substandard, requiring upgrade or renovation to the building that is greater than 15% of the cost of constructing a new similar building, as well as 70% of the area within the tax increment district being occupied, meaning some type of structure, including buildings, parking lots, streets, sidewalks, et cetera. So that assessment was done and did, again, provide the authority for the city to consider the establishment of a redevelopment tax increment district. The project that is proposed within the tax increment district would be a mixed-use project with first-floor commercial, with several stories of market-rate housing consisting of studio 1- and 2-bedroom units. There is 78 units housing units being proposed, as well as 65 underground parking stalls and surface parking to support the project. The tax increment financing plan includes the general project descriptions of the project, including the statutory authority, which again is the qualification as a redevelopment district, the purpose for which the district is being created, and again that's to facilitate redevelopment of the existing substandard properties into the new mixed-use building consisting of the both the first floor commercial and the housing. And it also includes the budget of the projected tax increment revenues generated by that new development and the total development costs. The county assessor did review the project's details and determine a taxable value of about $9 million, which over 26 years, which is the maximum term of a redevelopment district, could generate about $4.5 million. So the budget within the TIF plan is $4.5 million for both the total estimated project costs as well as the projected tax increment revenues. The first step So as part of this project, the developer is planning to finance it with private sources, including debt and equity. However, due to the extraordinary costs associated with acquiring the existing property, the site improvement demolition costs, as well as the new construction costs, including underground parking, there are significant extraordinary redevelopment costs, and tax increment financing has been requested by the HRA as an additional gap financing source to help close the gap that the private financing and equity cannot support. The request before the City Council tonight is to consider, after public hearing, adopting the tax increment plan, which simply provides the city and the HRA with the authority to use tax increment financing and allows the developer to proceed with some of the other financing sources that that he needs to close the financing gap. Should the project move forward, there would be a tax increment financing agreement that actually contains the term of the TIF assistance between the HRA and the developer. And so this, again, the TIF plan simply provides the authority to use tax increment financing, but it does not obligate the HRA or the City Council in any way for providing TIF. That would be where the TIF agreement would come at a later point between the HRA and the developer. One last piece, prior to creating a tax increment district, there are findings that need to be made, including the qualifications as a redevelopment district, what you might refer to as the but-for test, and but for the assistance, the project as proposed would not proceed, and that the taxable value to be created on that site is greater with the tax increment assistance than if no assistance were provided. As part of reviewing the financials, that would be included later, or the financials have been reviewed to determine there is a financial gap. The actual level of TIF assistance would be subject to the other funding sources that the developer would receive, and that again would come at a later date within the TIF assistance agreement. With that overview, I'd be happy to answer any questions or step aside for the public hearing and can be available
Any
for questions.
questions of staff or our Baker Tilly representative as to what the issue were just before us this evening? So far, so good. All right, it's 8:31, and I'm going to open the public hearing and ask if there's anybody in the audience or online who wishes to speak to the council regarding the TIF proposal and the project, or the project. Online, if you wish to note that you want to speak, you hit *3, and that'll let us know that you're online and wish to speak, and then *6, unmute you. If you're in the audience, please step forward, state your name and address, and let us know what you think of the project, or anything you want us to know about the project or the proposed TIF district. I'll ask a second time and a final time, and I will close the public hearing at 8:32. And it appears, Eric, that we've got at least two motions we're proposing. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. The first one appears to be, we are looking to adopt a resolution establishing redevelopment project number 2 and approving a redevelopment plan therefore. Period.
Should be all one.
All this is all one. And the second part of that establishes the tax increment financing redevelopment district 2-1 and approves the tax increment financing plan there too.
Move Johnson.
Motion by Johnson.
Second.
Is there a second by Stengline? Any discussion on the resolution? Any discussion on the resolution? A final time?
Kelly?
Yes? Oh,
We did have a, it's okay, it's okay.
Tiffany Stengline.
The planning commission did meet to talk about this, just to kind of boil down what we were talking about in our meeting was how this fits into the comprehensive plan. And also that this is definitely not going to be the last time we're going to see these folks. We will be seeing them many times over the course of this project. So no need to worry about the siding or whatever at this point.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Any further discussion? Hearing none. Administrator Bergman, please call the roll.
Chesak.
Aye.
O'Day.
Aye.
Stunek.
Yes.
Terry. Stengline.
Yes.
Johnson. And Bevins.
Yes, that resolution is adopted. Next, anything else we need to do for this? Eric, nope, okay. Item 9, new business. Item 9B is to adopt a resolution of municipality consent for deed redevelopment grant application by the Brainerd HRA. Eric Charpentier, tell us what we need to know.
Thank you, Mr. President and council. So hearing that we are allowed to move forward with, exploring and adopting or creating this TIF plan, all those funding sources that Michaela had referred to and the developer is looking at really brings us to this next item. So the Brainerd HRA would like to apply for a redevelopment grant through the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED, for the redevelopment of that former Thrifty White building. The redevelopment is really a demolition and redevelopment grant program, and either the city or the HRA or the EDA could be the applicant. Since we are looking at doing the TIF financing side of it, there are some matching dollars that the developer or the deed does require a 1 to 2. So for every $1 that deed puts in, we need to have $2 of match. By the HRA establishing that TIF district, we would have that match for that, so it makes sense for the HRA to be the applicant on this. And these dollars would be going towards that demolition or redevelopment at the site. It's one piece of the puzzle. What we are asking for from council is that you will give us municipal consent to do that and apply for those funding dollars from deed.
Perfect. Any questions of staff?
Chairman Beth?
Yes, Mr. Tizick.
What's the amount of the grant you're looking for?
Sure. So final numbers, as we work with the developer, are still being determined, but somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000. They've got about $2 million worth of financing available for our August 1st funding deadline. They do have another funding mechanism that would be in February as well. We do intend to try to get that application submitted for August 1st, though.
May I?
Yes.
And
Mr.
the
Tizick.
HRA has the matching funds?
With the creation of that TIF district, we would.
Got it.
Any further questions? Any further questions? All right, thank you very much. We're looking at the consideration of adopting a resolution of municipality consent for Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development grant application by the Brainerd HRA. Is there
Moved.
We have a motion by Stengline, a second by Johnson. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Administrator Bergen, please call the roll.
Chesak. O'Day. Stunek.
Yes.
Terry. Stengline.
Yes.
Johnson. And Bevins.
Yes, that resolution is adopted unanimously. And look at that, Tiffany, you were so right. It was the very next item. Item 9C is the first reading of proposed ordinance 1553, establishing Country Manor, a planned unit development district. Consider approval of the preliminary plat and final plat for Country Manor, and consider approval of the planned unit development general concept plan and development stage plan for Country Manor. James Kramvik,
Thank you, Mr. President.
tell us what we need to know.
Okay, so Country Manor has submitted a request to construct a senior living facility comprised of 92 apartments and 18 memory care units, a child care facility for 8 infants, 14 toddlers, 40 preschoolers, and 30 school-aged children, and for a rehabilitation service for residents and the general public. So this is really a 3-step process tonight. The first step in the process is to create a PUD district, which allows Country Manor flexibility on lot sizes as well as proposed uses. The proposed Country Manor PUD district has an underlying CN2 district for anything that is not called out in the table that's been provided. The PUD district allows for commercial daycares as a permitted use instead of a conditional use in the CN2, and also adds office business clinics as a conditional use in the CN2, which would not have been allowed previously. It also increases the impervious surface percentage to 75% from 60%. So the second step is replatting the property to allow for the creation of 2 lots and 3 outlots, as well as platting for potential future right-of-ways. The replat allows for the consolidation of Lot 1, Block 1 that's been included in the packet. Makes it possible for the senior living facility to be constructed on the north side of the property, as construction cannot occur across property lines. The last step tonight is to review the plan unit developments, general concept plan, and development stage plan. These processes can be done at the same time, and a PUD is required because Country Manor does propose more than one primary structure on the property. Per the provided findings, they have met all the criteria for approval, a staff recommendation. Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the ordinance amendment to establish a PUD overlay district, approval of the preliminary and final plat to allow Country Manor to establish 2 lots and 3 outlots, and approval of the planned unit development general concept plan and development stage plan. If the city council does approve these items tonight, the applicant would be required to enter into a development agreement with the city of Brainerd, as well as submit a PUD final plan that would be reviewed by the Planning Commission and city council at a later date. So with that, staff has recommended 3 actions and motions, and each should be done as a separate action and motion. So the first motion is to conduct the first reading of proposed ordinance 1553 and dispense with the actual reading, an ordinance amending section 515-2-21D of the zoning code. And note, a vote to dispense with the actual reading of the ordinance must be unanimous. The second recommended action motion is to approve Country Manor's preliminary plat and final plat based on the findings of fact with the following conditions. Approval of the preliminary and final plat are subject to city council approval of the rezoning request, which is proposed ordinance 1553. And the third recommended action would be to approve the PUD general concept plan and development stage plan based on the findings of fact with the following conditions. Approval of the PUD general concept plan and development stage plan are subject to city council approval of the rezoning request and approval of the Country Manor preliminary plat and final plat, and the final lighting plan conforms to section 515-4-8 of the zoning code and the CN2 district standards. With that, I can certainly answer any questions, and the applicants are also present from Country Manor. Thank you very much.
You did great. Thank you, Mr. Crampy. Can we take this by motion? So let's start with the zoning code. Any questions of staff on what we're looking for with the first motion presented by staff, which is the first reading of proposed ordinance 1553, and dispensing with the actual reading of the ordinance amending section 515-2-21D of the zoning code. Any questions on that before I ask for a motion from staff? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve staff's recommendation on that and hold the first reading?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Stengline, second by Chesak. Any discussions on the motion? Hearing none, and I remind you, it must be unanimous to not read it. Everybody say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Invited me.
Maybe a little bit.
Oh my.
All right, item 2 is approving the Country Manor preliminary plat and final plat based on the findings of fact with the following condition, and that's the rezoning request was the condition. Any questions of staff on that? Any questions of staff on that? Then we're looking for a motion to approve the preliminary and final plat based on the findings of fact with the condition that the rezoning request is approved.
So moved.
Motion by O'Day,
Second.
second by Stengline. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 3 is the approval of the planned unit development general concept plan, the development stage plan based on the findings of fact with the 2 conditions of city council approval of the rezoning, which we've done, and the final lighting plan of the zoning code and the CN2 district standards. Are there any questions of staff on that? Any questions of staff on that? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the PUD concept plan and development stage plan based on those findings of facts?
So moved.
Motion by Stengline, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Terry, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So again, this comes out of the Planning Commission. One of the things that we took some time to wrap our heads around was the stormwater and impervious surface percentages. But because they have to have an actual stormwater plan, the impervious surface percentages are less of an issue.
President?
Looking at James just to make sure. I got
Mr.
that.
Chazak?
Bevins, I just want to say I appreciate the work the Planning Commission has done on this and all the other work they do as much as I do all committees of the city.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Hearing none, we have a motion. We have a second. Did you have a comment? I apologize. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Anything else, Mr. Kramvik?
That is it.
On
So
that
I'll be I'll be in contact with the applicants.
Thank you very much. Next up is item 9D, looking for a date for the Flaherty and Hood Classification and Compensation Study presentation to be held, and Mr. Johnson already spilled the beans on this exciting item, after the BPU Commission, which is after the Park Board Commission.
Which is after these, so we got a 5-hour
Yes,
meeting that night.
Right, yeah, well, at least 5 hours, minimum.
One night.
Administrator Bergman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We kept this on here as a tentative meeting. We believe that we are going to ask instead to have a work session on the fourth Monday in August with Flaherty and Hood. We are not certain that the information will be ready by July 31st.
Okay, do you want to, okay, we don't have the July 31st. We actually hadn't scheduled it, so, right?
Correct. So the recommendation would be, for the BPU joint meeting, which has already been established, and the Park Board joint meeting, which also has already been
Chief,
established.
that work for you?
Has to.
Okay, so I double checked, so this would be do nothing so far, I like it.
We'll just be adjourning then to the
Yeah, we're gonna adjourn to the,
Park Board.
yep, the 2.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, next up is the public forum. This is time allocated for citizens to bring matters not on the agenda to the attention of the council. We usually like to have you keep it to 3 to 5 minutes. It is 8:46, and I will ask if you have anything you'd like to direct to the council's attention. Now's your time. Please come forward to the microphone, state your name and address, and let us know what's important to you. If you're online, *3 lets us know you have something to add. I'll ask a second time, if you're in the audience or online, and a final time, and I will close the public forum and go to staff reports. Let's start with Eric Charpentier, right in the middle.
Nothing further.
Cut it out, okay. Anything from Human Resources? Nothing from the Legal Department? From Community Development, Mr. Kramvik.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have one item here. So at the June 28th EDA workshop, staff discussed a few ideas to incentivize development along Washington Street. The first idea is allowing mixed-use development in the commercial corridor district, similar to Brainerd's downtown. This district kind of goes from Washington's Bridge to about the Cub Food area. So in conjunction with allowing mixed-use development, the EDA was also interested in creating an incentive program similar to the River to Rails, which allows for the waiving of building permit fees up to $150,000 in valuation from construction value, as well as waiving SAC and WAC. Staff will be discussing this with Brainerd Public Utilities and the engineering department to look at how potentially this could affect utilities. But with that, kind of the first step in here is at the next Planning Commission meeting, staff will be bringing this to the Planning Commission for consideration of mixed-use development within the corridor. And that is all.
Thank you. City Engineer, Public Works Director Dean.
Nothing to add other than the report in the packet.
Finance Director Hillman. All right, and we'll go. Sorry, it was almost forced I have it. IT GIS Director Strong.
Nothing.
Anything from the Police Department?
Yes, Mr. President, just one thing. I just would ask that we all keep in our thoughts and prayers the family of Fargo Police Department Officer Jake Wallin, who was murdered in the line of duty on Saturday. Some of you may or may not know he was the great nephew of former Mayor James Wallin and has a significant amount of family in the area. So just keep them in our thoughts and prayers, please.
Thank you. Administrator Bergman.
Just one item to let you know, we will be sending out a packet for the joint meeting with the BPU Commission, and that will go out on the 27th. Despite adjourning to, you will still get a packet as well.
Thank you very much. Next up is the mayor's report, and the mayor is absent this evening. We'll start with council committee reports. We'll start with our two chairs. We'll start Chairman O'Day.
I don't have much to add tonight. I know that Mr. Chesak and I did meet with the wastewater joint commission. And we had a interesting discussion about wastewater. And he was going to ask a question of our city attorney, I think, based on that. I just wanted to remind you. Make sure you didn't forget. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I've got three things. One, the Brainerd Baxter Baseball Association 10U baseball team went down to the Tournament of Champions this weekend and won the state tournament. So good for those boys. They get to go to a Twins game and get presented giant rings that look like actual World Series rings for winning state. So good on them. Second, the City Club, the Cubs, were up 6-0 in the third inning when I left tonight. God only knows what happened since then. And then finally, on code enforcement cases, I've complained about 1420 Quince Street a number of times this year. It's been over 10 years since the city council went to that property, met at that property, and voted to fine this property $100 a day until he finishes the project. It's still not finished. He's still working on it. So I have that complaint. I don't know how we're going to get that $350,000 from this guy, but let's look into it. But secondly, he has a semi-trailer parked in his driveway that has the door propped open with a cinder block, and I have complained to the city about this a number of times. A kid could climb up into that trailer, accidentally knock that block over, and get locked in a semi-trailer and die. It is a safety concern. It has been for years. And I have to complain publicly, because if I complain privately, you guys don't do anything. Please do something about 1420 Quince Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Tiffany Stingline?
Region 5 is going to be celebrating their 50th anniversary on the 27th. So that's pretty exciting. We're going to have a big to-do, yeah. And it's going to be held in Brainerd, so if anybody's interested, let me know. And I'm sorry I forgot the butterflies sitting on my kitchen table. I'll have to bring them next time. I know, I can tell you're so disappointed, Kelly.
Kara Terry?
We have our first age-friendly community meeting scheduled in a couple weeks, so that's going to be kicking off. Other than that, no updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chesak.
Yes, at the Joint Wastewater Management Board meeting, our professional, Mr. Charlie Gammon, is doing some work and has asked that we ask our city attorney to proceed on whatever questions that you might have. I guess I understand you're perhaps waiting for the state to get back to you, but Charlie's really waiting. There's quite a deadline looming. So whatever you can do to get that going, he would be very grateful, and I know the rest of the public utilities, and I know Mike and I would be as well. I would hope the council would support that too. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chesak. Mr. Stunek?
I have nothing.
Thank you very much. And we'll welcome Mr. Chansky home, our visitor and former Community Development Director. And of all things, the emails I got today, is the city of Brainerd going to address anytime soon the smoking of weed in public? So you got that to look forward to. As you know, the state has approved legal selling of recreational marijuana. So the things we get to deal with. We have two items left on the agenda. The first would be to adjourn to a closed motion, and I'll look for a motion to a closed session, and I'll look for a motion in 1 second here. This is pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, Subdivision 3, Attorney-Client Privilege, to discuss pending litigation, Scheffler versus the City of Brainerd. And since you'll all have to leave during that part, the second part will be to adjourn to, when we adjourn the meeting after returning into open session, we'll be adjourning to the July 31st, 4 p.m. Parks workshop, and then the 6 p.m. July 31st BPU workshop. So you're not missing anything. Item 14, is there a motion to adjourn to that closed session? So moved,
Second.
O'Day, second Stengline. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We will take a 5-minute break before adjourning to allow people to leave.